Hi, mamas. Michelle Noble, the Calmer Mom Coach, here for the Calmer Mom Weekly. And so, what I want to talk about today is joy to the world. As if you haven't heard enough Christmas carols already playing since before November. Um, now, I want to talk about joy and the number one joy kill. I've heard so many mamas say, what is it going to take for this to be more joyful, more fun? They're looking ahead to all the years between now and when they're hoping that their child will go off successfully to adult lives, imagining that will bring them relief. And from the moms I know whose kids are out on their own, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But anyway, the point being that they're just looking in there. It's like they don't want to find themselves doing the math all the time of like, my kid is 8 and that means 10 more years to go through. They want to be able to have joy and fun every day in their path as a mom and in their time with their kids. Well, the one of the number one things that gets in the way of that is probably the number one thing is fear. And we operate as moms, so much of the time we operate out of fear. There's a kind of fear of like things feel out of control because we need to get somewhere at a certain time and the kids aren't eating their breakfast and they're not, they're pretending that they suddenly have major hearing loss when you're trying to get them to get their shoes and coats on and, whatever it is. There's all that kind of fear of like, oh my gosh, I just am holding on to this functionality of my life by my fingernails. And it's just this close every moment to spiraling into complete chaos. Well, guess what? That's interesting because what if you were able to relax a little bit into that energy of chaos? Because kids are chaotic. How much of that comes out of this kind of like the tension between where you're trying to get everything so organized because there was a time in your life when you could function from I've never been organized. I've never functioned from super organizedness, but it was always like at least the order of like if things felt like I could make a list or I could brush my teeth faster and what I did kind of made the most difference in any given situation. And now there's all these little, our friend calls entropy machines. There's all these little entropy chaos machines buggering it up. So So what if one thing would be to kind of relax into the chaos of that? It may not even look that much different, but just expanding your energy, relaxing your body and going, yep, all right, here's some chaos again. How fun can that be? And being able to kind of enjoy the ride a bit more. But the other piece of this fear is we have so much fear and judgment about the effect about how what we do and how that affects our kids. I was thinking about there's just so many stories I've heard about where parents have at some point made a decision where what they did caused some pain to their kids, or something. I was thinking about, when Rosemary was little, when she was about 6, I think probably 6 weeks old, even before, because I think it was before I'd gotten ahead and gotten the Prozac prescription or Zoloft prescription I had for about the first year. I was just exhausted. I was so exhausted. The only way that she would sleep is if I just held her and held her. It seemed like, as soon as I tried to set her down, no matter how carefully I did it, she'd wake up and she'd cry and went on. And I was exhausted and my husband was exhausted. And so we weren't being really very kind to each other. And so I'd read this book, and in the book, it wasn't recommending doing sleep training for kids as young as 6 or 8 weeks, but it did have one story where a mom had done sleep training with her young baby. And in that case, the baby had learned to be able to sleep better on its own and then was more rested and was more comfortable and more soothable and more at ease. Well, that sounded right to me, that Rosemary herself was so exhausted. I knew that how sick I felt in my body, and that I imagined, well, maybe she feels that sick in her body. And if we could just get over this hump where she could sleep, she could learn how to sleep, then she would feel better and I would feel better and it would be better. So I decided to try it. I set her up in her bassinet, and, as always happened, she started to cry after a while, and I, waited and waited. I don't know how long. It wasn't a horrible amount of time, but her crying just ramped up and ramped up. And maybe after, I'm going to say maybe like 15, 18 minutes and 30 seconds, I couldn't stand it. And I went to her, and I could still just imagine this tiny little body laying there in her bassinet with this throw up next to her, where she'd been so upset that she'd thrown up. And I just felt horrible. I can still feel in my body how horrible I felt about it. And this tiny little person that I felt so much responsibility toward, but the responsibility was so heavy and it was so hard. And I was so afraid that it would never get better. And I was so afraid that I was doing it all wrong. And I was so judgmental that if I just could figure it out, it would all be better and she would be more content. And I've heard so many stories about situations where parents have, yelled at their kids or been a bit rough, maybe, set them down too hard in their bassinet or their crib, or given them that push in a direction where they just, instead of being always gentle hands, gentle voices, and how many times this may be a story. One mom, she told me a story, her children are grown with kids of their own. She's in her 60s, and she was able to relate with this emotional intensity with tears in her eyes, a time where she'd set her baby down roughly, her baby that was now like 35 or 40. And we make mistakes. We lose our composure. We do things on impulse and reactivity, and then we go to so much judgment of ourselves that then we're just in fear. It's like a PTSD, this fear that we'll do it again. And then we're human and we do it again. And then we feel so bad. And it happens over and over. And we end up in this sort of fear spiral, always this background fear that if we don't make the right choice, our kids will be wrecked. I mean, it sounds kind of ridiculous, but I think it's where so many times we operate from, that if I raise my voice, my child will be hurt and they'll feel like they're a bad person and they won't be able to have functional relationships when they're grown. I blew off helping my kid with their homework, and they're going to bomb the SAT, even though right now they're only second graders, whatever. It's like so many, we see so much of how we parent through this lens of fear that it will have a negative impact on our kids. And fear is a joy killer. You cannot live in fear and joy at the same time. You cannot live in fear and joy at the same time. There must be a way to let go of that fear. One of the ways is to recognize that our kids themselves are powerful creators of their lives. We yell at them, and we see it as maybe that they'll take that in and see it as criticism of who and what they are, and it will end up scarring them for life. What if they are powerful enough that they can have the choice of what if they take it in and they go, oh, that's just mom. She does that sometimes. Or, I don't like that. I'm going to go to my room, or I'm going to yell back, or I'm going to react, or whatever. And, what if that very experience of being exposed to some intensity, someone who's angry, means that later in their life, when they're exposed, when someone is pointing anger at them, maybe instead of going to victim mode, maybe the experience of having faced that as children will mean that they'll be able to go stand up and say, that doesn't work for me. I won't receive that. I'm leaving, or you have to leave if you're going to talk to me that way. They won't hang out with a spouse who treats them that way, or they'll be excellent counselors or police officers, or, have the ability to talk someone down from stress because they were exposed to some stress as children. And they know that doesn't mean that the world ends and things blow up. It means stress happens. People yell. So what? What if you're giving their child the gift of being able to look at someone yelling and go, so what? That may not ring true for you, but what if all those wrongnesses, all those things that you couch as your worst screw ups, are actually giving them amazing possibilities? So that's one thing, is just a reframe of not seeing them as as powerless victims to you. They are not powerless victims to however you show up. They have points of view, they have strength, they are powerful manipulators in their own right. Yeah, just recognizing that takes away some of the fear, a lot of the fear. The other major thing that's been such a huge help to me is the energetic release technique, clearing technique that I learned as part of Access Consciousness, called the bars. And so, if this stuff is really ringing with you, this fear, if you're really resonating with you cannot, things like that you cannot stand the idea of living with this kind of stuck, afraid, guilty, blah, for the next, 10 years, and you're just desperate to find some other choice, I will tell you that taking a bars class and learning about the bars and learning about letting go of this stuff and having a technique to work with. And if you take the class, you learn it yourself, and you could find the community of people. You become part of this community of people who can use it and trade and connect. So anyway, so I am doing a bars class this coming Sunday. And I'll post all that information in the newsletter. And I will be doing more in the future. So if this one isn't the one, if you would like to live in stuck fear for another month or two or another year, keep watching. You'll have other opportunities. And if you would like to choose something different right away before the holidays, change everything now. Then this is coming up really soon. And I say that a little sarcastic and tongue in cheek, but I know life happens. But if you can find a way, it's an amazing thing. And if not, that's okay. Keep asking. What would it take for things to be more joyful? What would it take for things to be more fun? Where am I being in fear where fear is not required? Ooh, that's a nice one. Where are you choosing fear when fear is not required? And everything that is, well, you just revoke, recant, rescind, renounce, denounce, reclaim, and uncreate all of that, right, wrong, good and bad, POD and POC, all 9 shorts, boys and beyonds. All right, ladies, have a joyful week.